only mode.
Hey, we are back. Welcome from Motionsoft's corporate office in Rockville, Maryland. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for a lively discussion with Three Pillar Global's Elisabeth Beller and Zareen Isaac on how to drive member engagement and revenue by getting in the minds of your customers. Today's education webinar is brought to you by the official media partner of the Motionsoft Technology Summit, Club Industry. Club Industry is the most trusted media source for fitness business professionals and the host of the annual Club Industry Show that will take place this year in Chicago on October 4th through 6th. You can learn more about the Club Industry Show by visiting clubindustryshow.com. My name is Todd Tweedy. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar and your host for the 4th annual Motionsoft Technology Summit. We've assembled an amazing advisory board of fitness industry technologists from Blink Fitness, Wellbridge, Gold's Gym, and 24-Hour Fitness. After weeks of planning, the board recommended cross-industry learning and innovation, technology insights and best practices fitness firms can gain from the hospitality and retail industries is our theme for 2017. In addition to connecting with senior fitness industry leaders at the summit, attendees will also be able to connect with senior executives from The Vitamin Shop, Union Square Hospitality, Jose Andres Think Food Group, and the former CIO of J. Crew. The Motionsoft Technology Summit is 3 days and 30 speakers. It's an industry event that brings really smart people together to discuss the challenges and opportunities of technology in the fitness industry, including our sponsor, Three Pillar, and Elisabeth Beller, who will be speaking during an education session at the summit. And our closing keynote this year is Dan Kath, the partnership lead for Reserve with Google. The 4th annual Technology Summit takes place in DC on September 11th through 13th. I hope you'll join us. All right. Before I turn things over to our experts today, I'd like to remind you that this session is being recorded. Your microphones are muted, but you will have the ability to ask questions via the chat interface that I'll review with you momentarily. After your webinar concludes, you'll be sent an email with a link to download this webinar recording. Now, I just want to take a moment to ensure that everyone's familiar with the webinar control panel and how to ask questions. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen, similar to the image that you're looking at here. If you don't see it, look in your taskbar for the orange clover icon and click it to open the control panel. You can submit questions during the webinar at any time by clicking the webinar control question module. And please now, if you would, just familiarize yourself with this feature by typing 3 Pillar. Awesome, thank you very much. Excellent, it seems like everyone's got a nice handle on how to use the tool. So finally, your Q&A session with your presenters will be held at the end of this session. If we run out of time, the 3 Pillar team will reach out to you directly. Now it's my privilege to welcome Elisabeth Beller and Zareen Isaac, who will discuss how to get in the minds of your members. Elisabeth and Zareen, welcome to the Motionsoft Technology Summit webinar series. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, Todd. We're happy to be here, and we're really looking forward to the Technology Summit in September. Before we get started, let's just take a minute to introduce ourselves. I'm Elisabeth Beller, and I lead the health and wellness industry team at 3 Pillar. As a company, we focus on digital product innovation and engineering, and my team in particular has a specific focus on clients in fitness, corporate wellness, and healthcare technology. I'm joined today by Zareen Isaac, who's a client partner on our health and wellness team. Zareen works with multiple clients in the fitness space, and she has really good insight about uses of technology in this industry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here.
All right, so let's dive into our topic for today. So every industry we work with is being disrupted with emerging technology or new business models. And we've seen this with companies like Airbnb in the hospitality space, Amazon in retail, and then most recently, we're seeing this with telemedicine in the healthcare space. Customers are leaving traditional providers for products and services that are much more personalized to their needs. Of course, we also see this happening in the fitness and wellness space. So we're going to spend time today talking about how you can get in the minds of your members to get ahead of the disruption, or better yet, become the disruptor yourself. Our specific focus today is to help you identify ways to better engage your members through the use of digital technology. We're hoping that you take 3 things away from today's session. 1, what it really means to be member-centric. 2, techniques to understand your members. And 3, how this understanding of your members creates an experience that will keep them in your gyms, therefore increasing retention and revenue.
Great. So I'll take it. I'll take this one, Elisabeth. The question we want to address here is whether you have spent enough effort in understanding who your members are and how you can get the best value from them and how they can get the best value from you. Now, you need to know your market trends. You need to know gym by gym or studio by studio data, and you need to know who your customers are on a personal level. Now, aggregating all this information together gives you enough perspective to be making smart decisions on where you should be investing. Now, we all know that retention is one of the biggest challenges in the fitness industry. Now, the most effective way we see to combat attrition is by driving up the value provided through deeper engagement. Listen to this statistic. 67% of people with gym memberships never use the gym. They pay for it, but they don't show up. This could be a lack of engagement. It could be a lack of convenience. It could be because they're self-conscious. And of these people, for those of them that drop out, it could be any of these reasons, in addition to the fact that they're losing money. So what we're seeing today is that consumers have more choices than ever. And they're starting to shift their spending towards products and services that better suit their individual needs. In some cases, this even involves higher spending. So companies that cater to this very specific need of customers who understood that there is an unengaged consumer out there, they are moving forward and starting to take significant market share. In certain markets, people are choosing to drop traditional gym memberships for Orange Theory or Peloton or other boutique studios. This ends up being far more than the average spend of $58 a month, which is what the average expenditure is according to the International Health Racquet and Sports Club Association, IRSA. These companies have pounced on a very specific way to address a need that hasn't been met yet. So we all need to stop assuming that we know what is best for the gym member and start asking the right questions. Tapping into a personalized way of engagement is a really great way to motivate people to continue on their fitness journey and not drop out. And a better understanding of your members is ultimately going to result in the stickiness that really every one of our fitness companies desire. So approaching your fitness technology with a member-centric mindset builds experiences that'll meet your customers where they are. So let's talk about what it means to be member-centric. Fundamentally, at its core, it means putting the member at the center of the experience, at the center of every technology decision that is being made. It is the responsibility of all members of the team to serve the customer and keep their needs and their interests at the core. Now, to do this, you must understand all you can about them. It's more than just knowing who they are at a surface level, but it's understanding their frustrations, their motivations. It's knowing what obstacles they had to overcome to be there that day. Or it's knowing what continues to drive them down this fitness routine and what they would see as failure or success for that matter. So, important note here, when you start to dig in with your customers and you start asking them questions, keep in mind to always ask about prior behavior, not so much future intention, because we're all pretty good at reporting our history, but we're pretty bad at predicting what we will do in the future. So being member-centric is taking all of this information and leveraging it to provide a personalized experience. So we'll talk a little bit later about specific processes that will get you there. But before that, we should ask the question, why does being member-centric really matter? What will we get out of it? Elisabeth?
Thanks, Zareen. That's a great question. And my answer is this. Without really truly knowing your members and creating the right experiences for them, you're really just wasting your time and money creating things that they don't want or need. This whole approach of being member-centric is about gathering data and developing meaningful insights and using those insights to personalize the experience. But in order for this to be successful, you have to think through what types of personalization will be valuable enough to get your members engaged and truly drive behavior change. Because if you know what your customers want, you can use that information to accomplish 3 very valuable things. 1, increase engagement. 2, increase retention. And 3, give your business more upsell opportunities. But increasing engagement and retention require one very specific thing: behavior change. So what does it really take to drive behavior change? If you have someone who's just getting started with a fitness routine or who isn't happy with their current routine, they're going to need to undergo some pretty big changes in their behavior in order to make this a new habit and to change their lifestyle. One of the things that we look at 3 Pillar is we reference the BJ Fogg behavior model, which you can see here on this slide, and it shows 3 things that have to happen simultaneously for a behavior change to occur. And these 3 things are motivation, ability, and a trigger. So let's spend a minute walking through this graph. In the upper left-hand part of the graph, you can see that if something is hard to do, it requires a high level of motivation to get someone to do it. In the bottom right, you'll see that if something is easy to do, it requires a low level of motivation to get someone to do it. Sounds simple, right? And this makes a lot of sense. Now the triggers in the middle of the chart, you'll see that the effective triggers have to be above the action line, the motivation and ability line, in order to be effective. So encouraging someone to do something that's too difficult for them can be very frustrating, and nudging someone to do something that they're not really motivated to do is really just annoying. What isn't reflected in this graph is a simple fact of human nature. It's much more effective and easier to make a task easier or to increase the individual's ability to perform the task than it is to try and boost someone's motivation. So the implication here is that the path of least resistance is to find a member's existing motivations and make it easy for them to achieve a behavior that satisfies that. The opportunities presented by digital technology are definitely available to help them get from hard to easy on the ability scale, and those are the types of things that you should be focused on. So take, for example, your typical New Year's resolution scenario. For the first month or so, you're really consistent about going to the gym several times a week. You've just paid for a new membership. You've publicly proclaimed your intentions on Facebook to all your friends, and you've just bought some nice new workout gear. You're highly motivated to do something, and even though it's hard to change your routine, you're motivated, so you're successful. Then fast forward a couple of months, and you've taken a week off for a work trip, and you've missed a week when your spring allergies kicked in, and you didn't feel like going to the gym. When your motivation drops, it's much harder to get yourself to do something that's difficult, which in this case is sticking with your new routine. As gym owners, your job is to figure out what motivates these members so that you can get them back into the gym on a regular routine. So with this in mind, let's talk about some specific techniques to make sure you really understand your members, their motivations, and how triggers would work for them. All right, so let's dive into a few specific techniques here. I always recommend starting with what you already have. So this might be a mix of both quantitative and qualitative data. You probably already have a ton of information about your members that you don't even realize you have, and you aren't doing anything with it. We call this being data rich but insight poor, and we see this everywhere. You definitely have information about member visits, and from that you can start mapping patterns from the data, including things like visit frequency, preferences for day of week and time of day for workouts. I'm assuming many of you have information about class attendance, instructor preference, preferred times of day. You also have data about personal training sessions, retail purchases, and other purchasing behavior by your members. Look through this information and analyze it to see what insights you can glean about your member population, both at the macro level and at the individual member level. So once you have a baseline understanding of your existing quantitative data, then you can take the next step, which of course is to gather even more data. So looking at all of this data and analytics is great, but I can tell you that nothing replaces a real live conversation with a member, a prospect, or a former member. The second technique for understanding your members is to talk to them. And I don't mean doing this through email and surveys. I mean personal conversations where you can keep asking why until you really understand a member's motivations, challenges, and behaviors. These conversations will help shed light on the quantitative data you reviewed during the first step and will help you really understand the data that you've gathered. So the biggest pushback I hear from our customers and potential customers about investing in this type of data collection is that they think it's expensive and that it takes too long. And I can tell you that neither one of those things is true. There's been significant research in the field of customer experience that indicates that you can typically talk to 10 or fewer people, depending on the diversity of your population, and develop an accurate picture of their needs, motivations, and triggers. So this is not a long, ongoing, expensive exercise. The key here is not to talk to tons of people, but to carefully identify the different types of people you want to talk to and to formulate really thoughtful questions that will help you dig deep and understand what the person is thinking and feeling and not just what they're saying. So let's talk about some specific tips for making these conversations effective. Use every interaction point with your customers and prospects as a way to listen and track data. As you do this, start to identify what pieces of data you want to track and update your systems to allow you to track it. And this really applies to everyone who interacts with your members, the front desk, personal trainers, class instructors. You need to make it easy for your employees to track and record what they hear from your members every single day. Have detailed conversations about past behavior rather than future intention. So Zareen already commented on this a little bit. She was talking about how we're better at reporting on past behaviors than we are on predicting our future behaviors. So for example, you could ask someone a lot of detailed questions. You could ask them to walk you through their entire day from waking to sleeping with a focus in between on all of their fitness related activities and what the motivations are to get them to the gym and what stops them from going to the gym. And you can use these data points to understand why they do or do not exhibit certain behaviors. And one of our third tips is to approach customer conversations in a way that you'll get a meaningful, honest response. And so there's a lot of things you can do here. Identify the right people to talk to. This should be a good cross-section of your population. Longtime members, new members, young members, old members, frequent club users, infrequent club users, people who are fitness fanatics, people who are really just casual gym goers. You've got working moms and stay-at-home moms. They all have different needs and different motivations. Don't ask leading questions or yes and no questions. Ask questions that really get them talking so that you can truly understand them and what they're looking for. You can't ask questions like, hey, how do you like our mobile app? Your job is to really deeply understand how they use your app and how they don't, and to discern how it could be improved to better meet their needs or to nudge them towards a certain behavior change that you're looking for. Ask a lot of follow-up questions, and when you do this, focus on the why and keep digging until you really feel like you understand what they're saying, not just the words they're saying, but the meaning behind what they're telling you. Assume you don't know the answers, so keep a really open mind about the things that they're telling you, and don't assume that you already know what they're going to say to you. And then lastly, from a tips perspective, supplement personal conversations with well thought out surveys and other ongoing interactions with your members to get a more complete picture of your members. All right, so that was a more in-depth look at how to talk to your customers. Pulling back up, let's go back and look at the third technique for getting in the minds of your members. Now you need to pull together everything you've learned so that you can go and see the forest for the trees. We have a few different tools for doing this, but we're going to talk specifically about one of them today. So on the next slide, we have an example of a persona. The persona board is a tool we use to pull together information about members once we've done all of our research. A persona is not a real person or a single individual. It's an amalgamation of information we learned about multiple people pulled into one single representation of a typical user. You'll want to create a handful of these for your member population. So for this example, this is Sarah. She's a young professional and she's a longtime gym member. And if you remember back several slides ago when we were talking about the BJ Fogg behavioral model, you'll see several things represented here. You see that we've specifically looked at Sarah's motivations and drivers. We've looked at the types of triggers that she tends to respond to. In the bottom right, of the table in the bottom right, you can see where the opportunities are to innovate around her specific abilities. We also track her aspirations, things that frustrate her, and other things that we know about her background and expectations. Now, obviously, you're not going to go and create one of these for each of your members. What you'll do is you'll figure out the similarities between your members and then determine a handful of personas that you need to represent everyone across your member population. So I'm going to hand it back over to Zareen to talk about what you can do with this data once you've collected it.
Thanks again, Elisabeth. All right, so let's talk through that a bit more. Once you have a better picture of who your users are, it's time to take action on the data in order to validate it. Validating what your initial research has told you will let you gain certainty on what technologies and products to build out. And it'll help you hone in on the types of engagements that you should be investing in. So let's take a look. A step-by-step approach to building on your data. First, embrace the opportunity to experiment. Build out a simple prototype. Release it to a randomly selected trial group. See how they respond. You can use reliable methods of testing to determine what is going to bring you the highest engagement rates. You shouldn't test everything, not every shade of blue or every title on every page. That would be an utter waste of time and valuable resources. But instead, focus on experimenting and adjusting the things that are likely to bring you the biggest lifts in engagement and adoption, the things that matter the most to you. So let's say it's a chatbot in your mobile app. It's going to serve as a companion or an assistant in the gym. Build out a prototype, put it out there, and get feedback. What does the customer find annoying? What parts do the customers seem to like or respond to? And more important than anything, what triggers are driving incremental amounts of behavior change? So it is important to recognize that people or customers, they really aren't always correct about what motivates them or what will actually drive them towards new habits and behaviors. So validating the assumptions that you've made about your customers and any of the conclusions that you've been inclined to come to based on all the things they've told you, it must be tested out. So embrace experimentation. Make small, controlled changes and watch the impact. Were their assumptions about themselves accurate when compared to their actual behavior? You adjust based on feedback and test again. 2, reward the good behaviors, engage the bad. If a customer has made it to a boxing class or a high-intensity spin class like 3 days in a row, breaking an older cycle of maybe lower intensity classes, reward it and give them the recognition. It counts. And they should get credit for the things that may indicate that they're beating their own record or they've overcome obstacles. And on the other end, alternatively, you could have a new member that's been, let's say, consistently attending for 3 months or so, coming in 3-4 times a week. But as you run your automated analytics on your data, you start to see that they're falling off their routine. They're coming in less and less. Well, this is a perfect opportunity for you as a gym or studio owner to send a trigger in to nudge the customer to come back in again. So there are ways you can do this. Let's look at a couple of ways that you may be able to inflect. One could be as simple as sending an email to the member to incent them to try a new class that they haven't tried before. Maybe you know that they attended the bar class a few weeks ago, maybe when they first joined, but you know they haven't tried the Pilates class yet. Or even better, we've seen organizations who have integrated with members' calendars, actually holding time on their schedules for a workout. And if for whatever reason that time slot gets overwritten with another meeting or event, the system proactively finds alternate times on the calendar to reschedule the workout. Now, granted, this is certainly a deeper level of integration, but is absolutely going to provide a lot more value to your customer. I will also add that it will be more impactful to call out the change in behavior that you're seeing very specifically in your communication, so the customer feels seen and they understand that you're speaking directly to them. And another thing I will say we should keep in mind when you're rewarding a customer is that there are numerous behavioral studies that have shown that extrinsic rewards like the Starbucks gift card or the cash rewards, they don't go very far to truly impact long-term behavior change, even if they do help you get that temporary spike in activity. So what will work most effectively for long-term change are things like social proofing, like getting people to do what other people do, driving competition between members, or getting them to listen to the voice of authority. So use methods that address those human tendencies, leaderboards, gamification strategies, things that cheer you on. So finally, number 3, test and learn continuously. Product development is not a one-time effort, especially with how rapidly technology is changing and how rapidly people's expectations are changing along with it. This should be a continual cycle. Always be collecting, be analyzing, experimenting, and adjusting. A product is never finished. As soon as you put something out there, whether it's an app or a new program or a marketing campaign, you're opening up the opportunity to learn and adapt and make it better each time you release it. Build broad and then narrow in. Continuously check in with your members to learn more about them. See how their environments are changing. Make sure you're continuing to go in the right direction and you're changing with them. All right, so let's bubble this all up. Here's where we are. You're collecting the data. You derive assumptions and insights from that data. You're running experiments to test your assumptions, and you're validating your learnings. All right, so let's take a look at one company that has been pretty prominent lately with how they've leveraged digital technology to change the game in fitness. Elisabeth?
So I know Peloton may not be the favorite topic for all of you in the audience, but I really can't think of a better example to prove our point. So this is a disruptive company that's changing the game by providing creative solutions to customer problems. I assume you're all familiar with Peloton, but just in case you're not, Peloton manufactures an internet-connected stationary bike with a large video screen that allows customers to live stream cycling classes in their home and interact with their instructors. So what's the big deal? People have had stationary bikes at home for decades, but this is different. Peloton has managed to create the same experience you have at a boutique cycling studio in the comfort and convenience of your own home anytime you want. The key with Peloton is the engagement factor. So for example, there's this live streaming of instructor feedback. There's a live leaderboard that tells you how you're performing compared to the class. Instructors have the ability to call out and encourage riders by name from anywhere in the country. They congratulate them on their 100th ride or anniversary because the instructors always have this data in front of them. In fact, they send members a free t-shirt when they hit the 100th ride milestone. This is an emotional touch point for users and creates loyalty. And part of what makes this all work is the multiple touch points and data inputs that are at Peloton's disposal. So beyond the initial investment in hardware, there's also the monthly subscription fee. And if you've paid a large amount up front for a bike that's really best utilized with the subscription service, it's unlikely that you would stop paying for the video content. In fact, Peloton claims that they have only 0.3% of their users canceling subscriptions every month. Customers will continue to provide a constant source of income for Peloton so that they can access the classes. But with that bike and those classes comes a ton of customer data, not only about them as a consumer, but also stats on their rides and their participation and things like that. With information such as what time they typically use the bike, which instructors they watch the most, and their physical statistics from their rides, the possibilities of engagement from Peloton's side are much higher. Disruptive ideas like Peloton are just not possible without a deep understanding of customer needs. So if you think about, if you're thinking that convenience is the primary driver for why someone would buy a home exercise bike, that's how we ended up with this. But knowing that competitive spirit, real-time engagement, and data-driven motivation are more important than convenience, or at least equally important to convenience, that's how you get this. But it's also important to know that Peloton was not immediately successful. They listened to their customers and made adjustments. Here's one example of that. One of the challenges that they face is the hefty initial price tag, $2,000 upfront for the bike, and that's not something that everyone can handle. This hurdle was preventing mass market expansion. So what did they do? They talked to their customers. Their VP of marketing said that in online chats or follow-up surveys of people who abandoned their shopping cart, many of them said they would love to have the bike, but they just couldn't pay for it upfront. They took that customer feedback into account, and Peloton made it available for customers to pay in installments over a set period of time. And by offering financing as an option, Peloton immediately saw a 15% increase in sales conversions without any promotion of this option, and a 16% increase in revenue per user. So if the Peloton story doesn't irritate you, maybe it will inspire you to find your own Peloton. All right, so let's wrap this up and talk about some next steps. Failing to pay attention to this opportunity really does risk your long-term revenue growth opportunities and will most likely start to impact existing revenue. Consumers are more demanding, and rightly so. The data available to product and services companies actually does allow for a much better consumer user experience than many of us are offering today, and we need to change that. If you take nothing else from today, there are 4 fundamental messages that we urge you to remember as you think about your product strategy moving forward. 1, go learn about your members and take the time to really, really learn about them. 2, brainstorm creative solutions for solving the real problems that are preventing your members from engaging today. So by listening to them, you'll start to formulate solutions to the problems that you didn't even know that they had. 3, start to experiment, and don't be afraid to pivot and change direction. Take a step back and reflect on how this aligns with your business strategy. 4, remember that this is a constant evolution because everything changes on a daily basis. Whether it be new disruptors, new technology innovations, changing consumer demands, your products must adapt and stay ahead. So we've enjoyed spending this time today. Todd, we're going to transition back to you and see if there are any questions at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Elisabeth and Zareen. Excellent presentation. Attendees, this is your chance to post questions to Elisabeth and Zareen to chat about how to get in the mind of your members. Again, use the question control panel inside of the interface, and you can pose your questions. And while you're doing that, I have a question. And I'm curious, with all the data that club operators are capturing, how do club operators balance personalization with member privacy?
Zareen, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a really important question, Todd. First and foremost, I should say that user feedback is really useful in understanding what your members might find too personal. And I don't mean that that's something that will define what you should stick to in terms of what you build, but you should know the sentiments of your user base and your customer base, the line between sort of just right and what's too much. But no matter what, you should anonymize your data and make sure you have privacy statements that a user can understand. But inevitably, going down this path of personalization, you are going to end up showing the members that you know more about them than they may realize. And it's really important that you control the message, that you have the necessary safeguards in place when you're holding personal information of your member base. So be proactive about complying with data privacy regulations. This is especially important if you're considering international markets where they're much stricter than in the US. But even consider HIPAA compliance, because the new world will probably require integration with healthcare at some point, and these are actually a really big differentiator. But if you do these things proactively, you'll be able to control the message to your customer when they raise privacy concerns instead of being reactive.
Awesome, thank you. You know, the club industry is kind of, let's say, unusual in how they manage their operations from one club to another. And I'm curious, as we look outside of the industry and as we think about how we manage member-centric programs, who typically, from your experience, should own this process? Is it marketing? Is it product?
So I would say that it's really a collaborative process, that the product team should be working closely with marketing to get this information. Keep in mind that from a product perspective, if you aren't driving engagement and helping to build your business, then you might not have a good product. A product is only successful if customers want to use it. So at the end, I think the right answer is that everyone in the organization owns it. Obviously, someone has to lead it, but every stakeholder impacted by customer attrition or retention issues ought to have a vested interest in this and should be participating in the process on a regular basis. And the process should be designed in a way that everyone is able to provide feedback.
What about for the fitness industry specifically? I mean, I know you're working with a number of clubs. Is it usually the IT team or sales, member managers, group fitness leads? Who kind of runs it inside of the club?
I think it definitely, from what we see with our customer base in the fitness space, it tends to be a combination of the product and engineering teams, because the engineering team also takes a lot of responsibility on the final product, and marketing, collaborating with marketing, because marketing is sort of controlling the way the message is put out there, and of course tracking engagement closely. So it really does tend to be a combination of those two that lead it. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, I have a question from Mark who wants to know, what are your recommendations for brick and mortar facilities?
Okay, a few things come top of mind. I mean, you can certainly do a lot of online marketing campaigns. Most likely you've got email addresses from all of your members. So you could leverage your consumer data to get more targeted experiences out to them through just campaigns. But from a digital technology platform standpoint, think about things like mobile applications if you don't have one already, and making those really robust and opportunities to engage within that. User-friendly designs, so no cluttered screens, etc. There are a lot of smart machines out there for like physical, like treadmills, ellipticals, etc. You could consider, depending on your demographic, virtual trainers may be an interesting option for you to address cost concerns from your members. Another way to gather really, I would think, really valuable in-depth user data and sort of usability data is beacons. Because if you insert those around the club and you use the right kinds of implementation approaches, you can actually start to gather data on how everything is being used, the types of activities that people are taking part in, and recognize that on a personal, individualized level. Electronic member records, in general, I think, you should focus on making those more robust behind the scenes. Consider integrating with wearables or making that option available to your consumer. Wearables is a massive market. It's constantly changing. It's hard to tell who's the leader in the space at any given time. I don't think we've really settled on that yet in the market, but staying ahead of that, at least with some of the leaders, and trying to build platforms that can be nimble and adapt to new wearables, I think that's important too. And again, keep in mind, kind of related to what I had said around the privacy question, integrating with health records is probably not too far off in our future if you want to plan ahead. So think about that as well.
Awesome.
I'm sure I'm not thinking of everything here, but yeah, there may be many others to be considered.
Yeah, certainly, we're just scratching the surface here. I've got one more question. This is from Brian. He'd like to talk about experimentation. Where do we start?
So I think the place to start is to have some sort of hypothesis that you're testing out. and then to develop, really to put a baseline product in the market with your members. One of the keys, I think, is to not try and do everything at once. So when you go out and talk to your users and your members, you're going to get so many requests. Everything sounds like a good idea. Oh yes, we should do that. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. But what you need to do is figure out what's really going to drive either your business or what's going to drive their behavior change. So we spent a lot of time today talking about behavior change. What are those things that you think are going to actually drive behavior change? Narrow this down so that you're focused on, what we call an MVP, and get that in the market and get feedback on that. And then you can make small iterative adjustments from there. And then once you make an adjustment, you test that out, and then you start to gather data about what's working and what's not working, and then you'll eventually have a product that meets the needs of a large percentage of your population.
Awesome, thanks, Elisabeth. And Zareen, thank you today as well, too. And attendees, appreciate you joining us here for this Motionsoft Technology Summit webinar series. If you'd like to talk to either Elisabeth or Zareen, we'll be providing their email addresses here shortly with the recording of the webinar. Thank you again, Elisabeth and Zareen, for joining us today. This will conclude our session. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.